The wind howled across the dark, glassy surface of Lake Seminole, a treacherous stretch of swamp just outside Tallahassee, Florida. It was December 16, 2000, and a bitter cold front had swept through, plunging temperatures to a bone-chilling 19 degrees. In the pre-dawn hours, a lone boat glided out onto the water, carrying 31-year-old Mike Williams, a devoted husband, father, and avid duck hunter. He promised his wife, Denise, he'd be home by noon to celebrate their 6th wedding anniversary. But as the sun climbed higher and the hours ticked by, Mike never returned. His wife's frantic voice broke the silence on a 911 call. "My husband went hunting this morning, and he's not answering his phone. Something's wrong." Search teams scoured the lake, battling icy winds and fading hope. When they found his abandoned boat, his shotgun still in its case, a chilling question hung in the air. Had Mike Williams fallen prey to the alligators that lurked beneath the surface, or was he the victim of a far more sinister predator? Background and setup: Mike Williams was the kind of man who seemed to have it all. A successful real estate appraiser in Tallahassee, he had built a thriving career, working diligently at Ketchum Real Estate Appraisers while holding down a second job through college. His life was anchored by his high school sweetheart, Denise, whom he'd met in 9th grade at a private Christian school. Mike, a charismatic football player, and Denise, a radiant cheerleader, were the quintessential all-American couple. They married young, and their love story culminated in the birth of their daughter, Ansley, a bright-eyed toddler who was the center of Mike's world. Friends described him as devoted, hardworking, and deeply in love with his family. "Mike was the guy who'd do anything for you," his colleague Clay Ketchum later recalled. He had this infectious smile, and you could tell he lived for Denise and Ansley. But Mike's true passion lay beyond the office, out in the wilds of North Florida. An avid outdoorsman, he relished the solitude of duck hunting on Lake Seminole, a sprawling, murky body of water known for its abundant wildlife and its dangers. The lake was infamous for its alligators, cold-blooded predators that ruled its depths. Yet Mike, an experienced hunter, was no stranger to its risks. He'd spent countless mornings navigating its waters, his small boat cutting through the mist as he set out decoys and waited for the perfect shot. It wasn't unusual for Mike to go out alone, his best friend, Brian Winchester, would later say. He loved the peace of it, just him and the lake. Brian Winchester was a key figure in Mike's life. The two had been inseparable since their school days, bonded by shared interests and a brotherly camaraderie. Brian, an insurance agent, was a constant presence, often joining Mike and Denise for family outings or hunting trips. To outsiders, their friendship was unshakable, and Brian's easy charm made him a natural fit in their tight-knit circle. Denise, too, seemed to adore Brian, and the trio's closeness raised no eyebrows, at least, not at first. As the year 2000 drew to a close, Mike and Denise were preparing to celebrate their 6th wedding anniversary. They'd planned a romantic getaway to a cozy bed and breakfast, a chance to reconnect amidst the demands of work and parenthood. Mike was so excited, a friend recalled. He said it was going to be a special weekend, just him and Denise. But beneath the surface, there were cracks in their seemingly perfect marriage. Mike had confided in Clay Ketchum about financial tensions, specifically, a credit card charge that exceeded the limits they'd set. It wasn't just the money, Clay later said. It was a trust issue. Mike felt betrayed. These quiet strains went unnoticed by most, but they hinted at a deeper unease in the Williams household. On that fateful December morning, Mike kissed Denise and Ansley goodbye, grabbed his shotgun, and headed to Lake Seminole. The weather was brutal, with high winds and freezing temperatures, but Mike was undeterred. "A lot of ducks out there today," he told a friend, his eyes lighting up at the prospect. He promised to be back by noon. But as the clock ticked past midday, Denise's worry turned to panic. Mike's cell phone went unanswered, and the lake, once a place of solace, became a stage for a mystery that would haunt Tallahassee for decades. The sun was barely up when Mike launched his small boat into the icy waters of Lake Seminole. The lake, surrounded by dense cypress trees and thick swamp grass, was eerily quiet, save for the howling wind that whipped across its surface. Mike, bundled in his hunting gear and heavy waders, maneuvered the boat with practiced ease, setting out decoys in the shallow waters. The plan was simple: a quick hunt, then home to Denise for their anniversary celebration. But somewhere between the launch and noon, something went terribly wrong. By late afternoon, Denise was frantic. She called her father and Brian Winchester, rallying them to the lake to search for her husband. As dusk fell, the group gathered at the boat ramp, their breath visible in the freezing air. It was chaos, Florida Fish and Wildlife Officer David Arnett later recalled. The wind was howling, the temperature was dropping, and we were looking for a needle in a haystack. The search was grueling, with rain and high winds making it nearly impossible to see. By nightfall, with no sign of Mike, the effort was called off, leaving Denise and her family in a state of dread. The next morning brought a breakthrough, or so it seemed. Searchers found Mike's boat, drifting about 300 yards from the launch site. His truck and trailer were parked nearby, confirming he'd been there. Inside the boat, his shotgun lay untouched in its case, alongside a few decoys and other gear. But Mike was nowhere to be found. The discovery raised more questions than answers. Why was the boat abandoned? Where was Mike's body? And why was there no sign of a struggle? Investigators initially leaned toward a tragic but straightforward explanation. Mike had fallen overboard, his heavy waders pulling him under in the shallow, alligator-infested waters. Everything pointed to an accident, Officer Arnett said. The boat, the gear, it all suggested he'd gone under. The lake's reputation for alligators fueled this theory. With hundreds of the reptiles lurking in its depths, it wasn't hard to imagine a gruesome fate. But Mike's mother, Cheryl Williams, wasn't convinced. Alligators don't eat people whole, she insisted. If they attack, they leave something behind, bones, flesh, something. But there was nothing. As days turned into weeks, the search intensified. Divers plunged into the murky lake, helicopters buzzed overhead, and search dogs scoured the surrounding swamps. Over 44 days, more than 700 man-hours were spent combing the area, but Mike remained missing. The absence of a body was baffling. Lake Seminole had a history of giving up its secrets. Every other missing person had been recovered, dead or alive. Yet Mike seemed to have vanished without a trace. Then, months later, strange clues began to surface. A fisherman found a pair of waders, eerily intact, with no signs of alligator damage. Soon after, a hunting jacket and a flashlight, still functional, were pulled from the lake. Most bizarrely, a hat appeared near the boat launch, floating on the surface as if placed there deliberately. Brian Winchester, who examined the hat, said it looked like one Mike might have owned, but a DNA test was inconclusive. These items were too pristine, investigator Jennifer Portman later noted. After 6 months in a mossy, algae-filled lake, they should have been degraded, torn, something. It felt staged. The condition of the evidence raised red flags. The waders showed no tooth marks, no tears. The jacket and flashlight were improbably clean, and the hunting license was still legible. It didn't add up, said Special Agent Devaney, who joined the case later. If Mike drowned and was eaten by alligators, where were the signs of a struggle? Where was any trace of him? Even more troubling, no one recalled seeing Mike at the lake that morning. For a man who was a regular at Seminole, his absence from witnesses' accounts was a glaring anomaly. Cheryl Williams refused to accept the alligator theory, pointing to the weather as a critical flaw. It was 19 degrees that day, she said. Alligators don't eat in cold water. They go dormant, almost like hibernation. They don't attack, and they certainly don't consume a body without leaving a shred of evidence. Her skepticism planted the seed of a darker possibility. Had Mike Williams been the victim of foul play? The investigation into Mike's disappearance began as a straightforward missing person case, but it quickly spiraled into something more complex. Florida Fish and Wildlife led the initial effort, treating it as a boating accident. We thought he fell out, got weighed down by his waders, and drowned, Officer Arnett explained. The alligators could have taken care of the rest. But as the weeks passed with no body, doubts crept in. The pristine condition of the recovered items, waders, jacket, flashlight, and hat, suggested tampering. It was like someone wanted us to believe he drowned, Agent Devaney said. But the evidence wasn't telling that story. Cheryl Williams became the driving force behind the push for a deeper investigation. Unconvinced by the official narrative, she took out full-page newspaper ads and erected billboards pleading for information about her son. Have you seen my son? The ads read, detailing his disappearance and the suspicious circumstances. She even took to the streets, demanding a criminal investigation, but her pleas were largely ignored. I went all the way to the governor's office, Cheryl said, her voice heavy with frustration. Nobody listened. The case took a significant turn when Jennifer Portman, news director at the Tallahassee Democrat, stumbled across one of Cheryl's ads in 2006, 6 years after Mike vanished. I couldn't believe it, Portman recalled. A man disappears, they say alligators ate him, and there's barely any coverage? It was bizarre. Her reporting brought renewed attention to the case, uncovering details that had been overlooked. One of the most troubling was Denise's swift move to have Mike declared dead. In Florida, a missing person typically cannot be declared dead for 5 years, but Denise petitioned the court just 6 months after his disappearance. Armed with the pristine waders, jacket, and flashlight, she convinced a judge to issue a death certificate, citing the alligator theory. It was shocking, Cheryl said. No body, no proof, and yet she got what she wanted. The death certificate unlocked a windfall, 2 life insurance policies totaling $1.5 million. One policy, written by Brian Winchester just 6 months before Mike's disappearance, raised immediate suspicion. We don't know if Mike even knew about that policy, Sheriff Derek Webster said. It was filled out as if he'd signed it, but something felt off. Brian, as Mike's best friend and insurance agent, had facilitated the policy, and Denise was the sole beneficiary. When you hear about a large insurance payout and a missing body, your radar goes up, Webster added. Investigators began to scrutinize Denise and Brian's relationship. Rumors swirled that they had been closer than friends before Mike's disappearance. We heard from multiple sources that Brian and Denise were having an affair, Agent Devaney revealed. The timeline was murky, but the implications were chilling. Had they conspired to eliminate Mike for the insurance money? The theory gained traction when, less than a year after Mike's death was declared, Brian divorced his wife and married Denise. They moved into Mike's old house, raising Ansley together while cutting ties with Mike's family. It was like a dagger in the heart, Mike's brother, Nick, said. My brother's best friend and his widow, living off his money in his house? It felt so calculated. Another clue deepened the mystery, the shotgun found in Mike's boat. Nick insisted it wasn't the one Mike used for duck hunting. Mike was meticulous about his guns, he said. That wasn't his hunting shotgun. Further, Clay Ketchum revealed that Mike stored his guns at the office, which required a personal code to access after hours. Records showed Mike's code was used the night before his disappearance, but there was no definitive proof he was the one who entered. Someone used his code, Ketchum said. But was it Mike? The investigation also uncovered strains in Mike and Denise's marriage. Mike had confided in Ketchum about financial disputes, particularly a credit card charge that sparked a heated argument. It was about trust, Ketchum said. Mike felt Denise had crossed a line. These tensions, combined with the insurance policies and the affair rumors, painted a troubling picture. Yet, without a body or concrete evidence of foul play, the case stalled. An insurance fraud probe was launched, but it failed to yield definitive proof. We knew something was wrong, Webster said, but we couldn't cross that line into an arrest. The case might have faded into obscurity if not for a shocking development in 2016. Brian Winchester, now estranged from Denise, was arrested for allegedly kidnapping her at gunpoint. According to Denise's court testimony, Brian ambushed her in her car, shoving a gun into her ribs and screaming profanities. He was unhinged, she told the judge, her voice trembling. I thought he was going to kill me. Denise's teenage daughter, Ansley, also pleaded with the court, writing, he had a gun. He could have killed my mom. She's all I have. Brian pleaded not guilty, but the incident cracked open a window into his volatile relationship with Denise, and raised hopes that one of them might finally break their silence. Outcome and aftermath. The kidnapping incident marked a turning point, but it wasn't the confession Mike's family had hoped for. Brian's arrest brought renewed attention to Mike's disappearance, but no charges were filed in connection to the original case. Denise, meanwhile, remained tight-lipped, refusing to speak to investigators or Mike's family. She cut us off completely, Cheryl said. She told me if I pushed for a criminal investigation, I'd lose access to Ansley. I'd already lost my son, I couldn't lose my granddaughter too. Despite the lack of arrests, Cheryl's relentless advocacy kept the case alive. Her newspaper ads, billboards, and public pleas drew national attention, with outlets like Crime Watch Daily picking up the story. Reporter Ana Garcia confronted Denise at her home, but Denise fled, tires screeching as she sped out of the driveway. Brian, too, dodged questions, with Garcia finding his insurance office empty. The couple's refusal to cooperate only fueled suspicion. The legal outcome of Brian's kidnapping case added another layer of intrigue. He faced charges of kidnapping, aggravated assault with a deadly weapon, and armed burglary, but the resolution of that case did not directly implicate him in Mike's disappearance. Still, Mike's family clung to hope that the strain of Brian and Denise's crumbling marriage might lead to a breakthrough. "It's going to take a confession," Nick said. "Unless one of them talks, we may never know the truth." The case had a profound impact on Tallahassee. What began as a presumed accident became a symbol of unresolved grief and suspicion. The community rallied around Cheryl, who became a local icon for her tireless fight for justice. "She's a mother who won't give up," Portman said. Her ads, her billboards, they made people talk. They made people question what really happened. The media frenzy amplified the mystery, with headlines speculating about alligators, insurance fraud, and a possible love triangle. The legacy of Mike's disappearance is one of unanswered questions. Without a body or definitive evidence, the case remains open, a cold case that haunts investigators and Mike's loved ones. Cheryl holds on to a sliver of hope that Mike might still be alive, perhaps having faked his death to escape his troubles. "Until I have proof he's dead, I'll believe he's coming home," she said. But most believe Mike was murdered, his body disposed of far from Lake Seminole, with the boat and gear staged to mislead investigators. Closing reflections. 17 years after Mike Williams vanished into the icy waters of Lake Seminole, his fate remains one of Florida's most perplexing mysteries. Was he devoured by alligators, as investigators first believed, or was he the victim of a calculated betrayal by those closest to him? The pristine waiters, the untouched shotgun, the suspiciously timed insurance policies, they all point to a truth that lies just out of reach. Cheryl Williams' unwavering fight for answers reminds us that love and loss can drive a mother to challenge even the most accepted narratives. As the sun sets over Lake Seminole, its murky depths still hold their secrets, whispering a chilling question: what really happened to Mike Williams? Until someone speaks, or a body is found, the answer may be lost forever in the swamp's cold embrace.